Welcome back. So one feature that fans no doubt want to see right at the launch of the Switch 2, including myself, is some form of full-on backwards compatibility. Now we don't know exactly how Nintendo will go about doing this. It seems like it will be very simple if we are to believe the leaks about this being a successor console to the Switch that very much looks, runs, and feels like a more powerful Switch. I would expect it to have something like a physical solution similar to what we saw with the 3DS, where you have a different shaped cartridge, potentially just at the top like a new notch on there that allows only the new Switch 2 cartridges to be slid into that console. We already know Nintendo's rolling Nintendo accounts forward. They have stated that themselves publicly to investors, and that will likely tie through all of our eShop purchases, allowing us to easily re-download our entire content library from the Switch. One thing that's been recently spotted online, which is very exciting, is potentially the most concrete evidence we've seen so far suggesting that Nintendo is not only actively working on backwards compatibility support for their next console, but also putting in the tools to provide enhanced backwards compatibility. This means your Switch 1 games will actually run better on the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware. Thanks to some brand new datum and information that just hit the internet recently, it appears that in the 180.0 system firmware running on our current Switches today, some of the legwork and code could have potentially been put into place to support things like a better running Switch 1 library of games on your Switch 2. There's even the idea that Nintendo might be creating a longer cross-generational support path than we were expecting when it comes to software support for the Switch 1, with Switch 2 versions of games that just run and look better. Now let's first over to Nintendo, where they have a write-up with exactly what's been spotted around this 180.0 system firmware update. Before we read through that, I do want to say this is great news and further information supporting enhanced backwards compatibility. But if you're worried about backwards compatibility potentially being missing from Nintendo's next-gen console, I really don't think you have anything to worry about. We've seen interviews with the Ubisoft CEO, where he's pretty much come out and said that their plan is to update and resell sparks of hope on the next-generation Switch. We've had a lot of different tidbits of information suggesting that Nintendo has this feature fully intact on their next-gen console. Insiders like Nate the Hate have gone out of their way to post on social media, blatantly stating that backwards compatibility is a thing in this console. If you look at Nintendo's history with their handheld and home consoles, unless there's a massive media form factor switch-up, they always provide some kind of backwards compatibility to the most recent system. So rest assured, we're going to get it as a feature. The exciting part has to do with these new details, which you can see here. Nintendo Switch 2 reverse engineering the current Switch firmware reinforces backwards compatibility on the next console. Nintendo is already paving the way to identify games compatibility in the hardware operating system. A group of hackers has continuously been doing reverse engineering work on the Nintendo Switch firmware, aiming to create tools called homebrews for the most diverse purposes. It turns out that in version 108.0 of the firmware on the Nintendo Switch, strings of code 1, 2, and 3 link to different detailed readouts of the Nintendo Switch 2 code. Now, we're not going to walk through all of those, but they indicate that Nintendo is preparing its operating system to identify the compatibility of games between consoles. This new update appears to support a new type of mount point, a way to expose system files for games classified as compact. Among the hypotheses raised by users, it's suggested that this could allow for higher quality graphics features for Switch 2, shader caches from both developers and Nintendo, and the use of unified file systems for cross-gen games. I'm not claiming to be a top-level expert, fully understanding the breakdown of the code these data miners have found, but what is clear is that something in this 180.0 firmware is laying the groundwork for games to recognize the system they're being played on. If your Switch 1 cartridge is in a Switch 1 console, it will stick to its expected code. If it's plugged into a Switch 2, there could be a secondary profile within the game code that says, "We have more processing power and graphics compute power, so we can crank up the frame rate," and so on. Thanks for watching.